How's it going? These are some things you got to keep in mind if you're trying to make your recording as good as possible. Number one, tune. If you're playing a guitar, a bass, anything with real strings, tune between every single take. Every single take, and sometimes half takes. If you play a little bit and you think it's out of tune, it's probably out of tune. Tune it. Because if it's not in tune, it's going to make it impossible to deal with. And part and parcel with that is get your guitars set up. Like whatever guitar you're using, if the neck has warped, if the intonation is off, deal with that. Because intonation being off could mean your guitar is in tune when it's hitting the open strings. And as soon as you put fingers down halfway up the neck or a little less, 5th fret, 7th fret, you're going to start hearing wonky, out of tuneness that becomes nearly impossible to fix. You can try to fix it with Melodyne. You can try to fix it with Auto-Tune. But I guarantee you, I've never, ever really been satisfied when I've done that. I've always been like, ugh. And if I can, I play it again. Because that's the move. You have to make it sound good. Don't send it off hoping it's going to be made to sound good. And if you think to yourself, I'm not sure if it's in or if it's out, I guarantee you it's out. So just do it again, because you shouldn't think that. You should just love the way it sounds. All right? Auto-tune, when you use it on a vocal, all right, you got to get sort of into this thing where the person you're using auto-tune on has to know ahead of time you're going to use it, and they got to be okay with it. You sort of have to have a conversation with them to figure out where they stand. Because if you're dealing with someone who hates auto-tune, but their voice sounds like dog, then guess what? And I'm not talking about Temple of the Dog. Temple of the Dog's awesome. I'm talking about dog poop. If that's the case, you got a real problem on your hands. You got a real problem on your hands. Because nothing you're going to do is ever going to sound good at the end of the day if the vocal is totally out of whack. So you got to bring it into whack. And if that person doesn't like the sound of tuning on their voice, you're dealing with an insane person. Or you're dealing with somebody that's very, very impossible to work with. So you have to know this out the gate. You got to start getting comfortable with what's going on, with talking to people, with asking questions, and with getting their answers. You shouldn't just take the work and start working on it and then deal with this later. That's a can of worms. Another thing, if you record in a room that's too, like if you're too close to a hard surface, like a wall of any kind, you could be getting reflections off it, and that's bad. Those early reflections are always going to make your vocal sound less present. So that's why I often recommend like the middle of a dead room is usually better than anywhere near a corner or a wall, unless the room is really well treated. Like vocal booths will work because they are so well treated, okay? But even in a vocal booth, you're not pressed up against the wall most of the time. If you clip the signal, you're chopping the head off the sound wave, and it's impossible to deal with. So make sure if you have to err on a side of a little loud or a little low, you go a little low. And if you invest in anything, if you're a vocalist, you should be investing in some sort of front-end compression, because it will change the way you sing, number one, because you won't ever feel like when you get loud, you're clipping the signal and then you can't get as loud. It basically hinders your ability to perform if you don't have some way to smush the signal a little bit, a little compression, a little bit of peaks off when you're singing into the mic will make a singer way more comfortable with getting loud. You also need what do you call it? Like some technique, vocal technique. Vocal technique when you're singing means when you're going to belt, you back off the mic a little bit. And when you're singing quietly, you can get close to the mic. That's sort of like, you know, you can't just be really close on the mic and then yell right on the mic. You got to back off a little if you do that. So you got to learn vocal technique. But even with learning the vocal technique, you also need some sort of peak shaving action happening. So this is why 1176 compressor is great. You don't need like 2, 3, 4. I'd say just get one to start, okay? If you could always build on that. But having one compressor on the front end will help a lot. So That was one of my first pieces of gear I ever bought, was an 1176 compressor, and I love it. I can't live without it because on the front end, it's so helpful. If everybody in the band is around each other, like if you're all recording in the same place, share a tuner. I can't tell you how many times a crap tuner will ruin a recording, because one crap tuner could be slightly, a cent off, half cent, a few cents one way or another, and mess everything up. Plug everybody into the same tuner, just for the simple reason that 440 will be 440 the same, because it's not always the same from tuner to tuner. This is huge. All right. So once you're tuning every take, it still helps if everybody's A is everybody's A, if it's all locked in. All right, trust me on that. What else? Strings. Dead strings have a sound, okay? And bright strings have a sound. So if you want your bass to sound bright, you probably should change the strings, because consequently, the same thing goes the other way. If you want your bass to sound dull or, warm, more round, you should probably use older strings or flat wounds. Use a different type of string to create that, because the strings make such a difference on certain instruments, especially bass. Bass strings are huge, and bass players don't like to change strings typically because they're very expensive. But if you want that pop, that like bright fizzly pop out of the bass, you got to have new strings. All right. What else? Don't spend a ton of time miking up your drums if you're just going to use old crappy heads and not tune the drums. Like, what's the point? Make sure the drums are tuned. Make sure the heads are new if you want more pop and snap to them. Put some time and energy into, if you want a dead sound on the drums, you may have to add things to your snare drum, like tape, or those like tortilla things, like that dude Jake Reed sells those things. I think his drums sound awesome because he's deadening them out in a way that's very cool and unique. I've done it with a ton of things. You could do it with paper, tissue paper. You could do it with duct tape. You could do it with cigarette boxes. Cymbals, the same thing applies. If you put like a piece of felt on the cymbal, it'll darken it way up and give you a much more lo-fi sound. So you gotta be looking at everything you're recording as, how can I improve that before I start? Because afterwards, it's not the same. If you're going for a sound and you try to make it good after, you'll be boxed in to whatever you could do. Whereas if you do it before and build the sound into the drums, it actually will sound way, way more natural. And that natural feeling just translates to a real sounding record. All right? Because as we've talked about before, I believe in takes on the fly, on the spot, using the first take or second take. Like, don't do a million, because the energy in the first one is way better than once everybody gets sick of the song and they're on take 5, take 6, take 8. In my opinion, that ain't the way to do it. Capture the energy, get everything right before everybody plays, make sure nothing's clipping, and make sure the sounds are the way you want them, with the drums tuned, with the mics right, with everything done the way you want, with the stuff in phase. Don't expect to do it after. Get it done at the time, because it'll help you with all your other decision making as well. All right, same with in phase on guitar, on everything. If you're doing multiple mics on bass, whatever it is, get it all in phase before you record. Don't do it after. Okay, this is critical stuff. I hope you guys like the video. If you did, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button as well. It really helps the channel out if you could. And there'll be tons more videos to come. If you have a song you need mixed and mastered, we have a special offer right now in the description. Check it out. And we offer mixing and mastering lessons. Take it easy. I'll speak to you soon. You guys got this. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios.